You're not entitled to anything. Nobody cares how hard you work in the weight room or how much film you watch, or they don't care about any of that stuff. If you're not adding enough value, then you get fired. I think you got to earn it. If you show up with this mentality to earn it each day, you'll probably do better work. You'll probably add surplus value. The first question is, am I curious enough to do 10 hours of prep work on that person? Read their books, watch their YouTube videos, read everything written about them online. So I'm just looking for stories, looking for things that they care about, looking for ways to set them up to tell interesting stories, and then we're kind of rocking and rolling from there.
What are some of the commonalities that you've identified amongst the top leaders that you've had the opportunity to interact with?
I've honestly written full books about that, so I'll do my best to compress that down. I honestly, I could think of just two things that the overwhelming majority of leaders who have sustained excellence over time seem to have in common. One, they're very thoughtful and reflective people. They don't just kind of wander around and cross their fingers and hope for the best. They're really thinking through their behaviors, their actions, their habits, their routines, their rituals, and how they show up each day. And two, that goes with that is they're very intentional. So they spend a lot of time in thought and reflection, but then they also have a bias for action and act with intention. There's a purpose behind it. There's a reason for what they do. And that is the difference, I think, between the people who sustain excellence over time versus the ones who don't. They're just much more purposeful in their life and do it for good reason, but also take time to think and reflect and to surround themselves with people who will help them, who will lift them up, and they try to do the same for them. So if I really had to boil it down, I would say they're quite thoughtful and intentional people.
I feel like intention and bias for action are key themes that are getting a lot of credit these days. And I kind of alluded to it at the top. Someone who has the kind of exposure that you do to such high impact leaders, but also leading the way with their own content in an age like artificial intelligence, the revolution that we're entering into, have entered into. How can people start to cultivate their soft skills, their leadership in a way that makes them serviceable and valuable in this age of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I just actually interviewed a guy named Scott Galloway, really funny, crude, but impressive communicator as a leader. And his thing that we went deep on was you want to be a person who adds surplus value. And I think of that with my clients, with my show, with my books, with my speeches, whatever it may be, is whatever they're giving me from a monetary perspective, or even more importantly, with their time, I want them to feel like they're getting surplus value, meaning they're getting more value than they feel like they should. I spoke with one of my clients yesterday, and that was the exact question I asked him, and we talked through why he feels he is getting much more than he is paying for, and I want it always to feel that way when it comes to my work. And so I think it goes back to these people who are intentional or not, is showing up with the intention to add surplus value to other people, to be a value added resource in people's lives, to be useful, to be helpful. I learned this from a young age, and it was quite helpful in college. My freshman and sophomore year, I'm at Miami University. I'm playing quarterback for the team. I'm competing for the starting quarterback job with another guy who ended up being really good named Ben Roethlisberger. But the reason I bring the story up is because he added more value to our team than I did. He gave us a better chance to win, which was the ultimate goal of our coaching staff and the players, than I did. And so when that happens, that person gets the job, that person gets to play, and you sit on the bench, or you have to move positions or do something else. And it was awesome for a 19-year-old arrogant punk kid, me, to learn that at such a young age, because it's really altered how I view work and how I view partnerships and how I try to show up in the world every day, because you really have to earn it. You're not entitled to anything. Nobody cares how hard you work in the weight room or how much film you watch, or they don't care about any of that stuff, right? If you're not adding enough value, then you get fired. And if somebody else adds more value than you, and you guys do the same thing in the case of playing quarterback, then they get the job and you don't. And so I learned that really early on, and I try to take that mentality to everything I do, whether it's my podcast or it's any of the clients I work with, that I tell them I have no long-term contracts with anybody I've ever worked with, none. I don't get paid prior to speaking when I go on stages, even though professional keynote speakers will tell you that is a mortal sin to ever do that, but I don't. I've never got stiffed, by the way, by either a client or on a speech. I think you got to earn it. I'm not entitled to anything. And I think people, if you show up with this mentality to earn it each day, you'll probably do better work. You'll probably add surplus value. You'll probably be much better. So whether it's AI or another person or another company or anybody else, I honestly don't really care. I'm going to just try to add surplus value. And if I don't, then I get fired. Right. And then I got to move on to the next one and I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So that's really the consistent drumbeat in my mind is what am I doing to be useful and to add value to your life?
What is your preparation process like when it comes to handling a guest or getting ready for a guest? Like, we'll just use Tony Robbins because I feel like that's a familiar name people can understand. But in over 500 episodes, there's many more. Morgan Housel, the list goes on.
Most guests, I'm already quite curious about them or very curious about them, and I've probably read their stuff. You mentioned Morgan Housel, right? I've read every essay he's published probably in the last 5 years, in addition to his books, same as ever in the Psychology of Money. So like that's an easier one because I've already read it before I booked him as a guest, and I've had him on a few times. Tony Robbins, I haven't read all of his stuff, but I've read some of it. So the standard would be to go to read probably 8 to 10 hours worth of their material from books, from essays they've published online, from things written about them. I'm going to watch videos on YouTube about them as well as their own speeches. I love trying to find stories that they've told that aren't super publicly known yet. And usually you can find those deep within some of their books, that some of their stories, or even sometimes even at the beginnings of their books, because most people don't read books. And so you can go find those stories and I could surface them and tee them up. And if you probably realize this as a listener, I just tee them up to then tell one of their stories. And you see the smile on their face. You see that they get excited to retell the story that maybe they've written about in a book or told in an old speech. And that kind of jump starts them and gets them excited and says, oh, this feels a little bit different. So I'm always looking for like those interesting stories. I always read the acknowledgement section first in their books, and I look for love. I look for people that they love and care about. And maybe I'll ask a story about somebody they love, and that evokes a cool story. That makes them emotional. That gets them going. So I'm just looking for stories, looking for things that they care about, looking for ways to set them up to tell interesting stories. And then we're kind of rocking and rolling from there. But I think the second part of that from a prep is the prep process is you could have your outline, you could have your questions, you could have your ideas, but ultimately it's about you being a really good, deep listener and asking good follow-up questions. I think that's that's what separates the good from the great, is listening and asking really good follow-ups based on what they said. And the problem is, or the fun for me, and I tell my guests this, the fun of that is I have no idea what that's going to be. You can't script that. You can't even fully prepare for that. You just have to be very present. And I think part of the skill there is just a lot of repetition. I've done it a lot. And then the benefit, though, is you take those skills you develop doing this podcast like you are, Jonathan, and then you go out into the real world in your job or with people, and hopefully that stuff just continues to happen where you become a better listener. You ask better follow-up questions just in that day-to-day conversations, and it makes you a more interesting person because you're an interested person. And I think being interested and fascinated by other people and their stories and asking them good questions and even better follow-up questions, you're just going to be a more interesting guy. And that will benefit you in many, many ways to deepen relationships, get promoted, whatever it may be. And so I try to do all those things and think about all of that when it comes to the prep for each show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. I love that. I think, first off, the amount of energy that goes into every interview, I think people should really just appreciate your commitment to providing a quality experience and product for everyone. There's a couple, frameworks I'd want to want to run by you. There's, this concept, at least when I'm a former criminal prosecutor. So part of what I do is try to special victims. And so part of what I try to do is, at some point with any witness, you have to kind of get their background information. But podcasting, I feel like sometimes the backstory doesn't necessarily bring in the listener as quickly as maybe, some type of engaging question. Because in this kind of society, we only have, even with labeled or thumbnailed, I guess, interviews that kind of go to the topic, we don't necessarily have that opportunity outside of the first 10 seconds to captivate the individual's attention. And so I try to frame my interviews in a way that's issue-based and also person-based, so I can get to know that person's opinions on the things that matter, in this case, leadership, and also background, going to your credibility and who you are. And then the other aspect is, I wonder if you've ever heard this before, the concept of a triple threat podcaster.
What's that? Just
like you have a triple threat actor, right? Or can sing, dance, act. A triple threat podcaster is a good interviewer. She is entertaining and has a very strong opinion on things. And so like when you combine those three, you get the triple threat podcaster. And so, I've definitely noticed that you meet those elements in your content.
Who are some others I'm curious that you listen to? I'm always looking for good, I guess now, triple threat podcasters.
I would say Patrick Bet-David is definitely up there for me. I would say his interviews, like one-on-ones, like his big ones where he's had like events. I like Chris Williamson. I think he's really talented. Yeah. He's had a good couple years recently. Those are kind of like the main, and you, obviously, those are the main kind of inputs that I would say right now are kind of governing my style. I feel like a lot of people get caught up and don't know how to make a decision. Last night, without throwing anyone under the bus, I know someone who knows someone. They were going back and forth in text message, and it was like, should I come? Should I not come? Should I come? Should I not come? I just, that's simple example. But obviously, with much deeper decisions in life, if someone is looking to, leave a job, move a state, make an intense decision in their life that has consequences, how can people be more decisive in your view?
I try to tie everything back to my purpose and core values. My core values are being thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And there are critical behaviors to match those. And so if it's in line with my values, if it's in line with my purpose, which is to inspire others to both value and pursue excellence. Excellence to me is defined as like maximizing your capabilities, as well as it ends up being the Pat Riley quote, which is the gradual result of always striving to do better. So if it's in line like with my purpose and with my values, it's probably an easier yes. I also think it's really important to have a kitchen cabinet, to have a mentor, board of advisors, a personal MBA, which is who are these people in your life that you can call, that you can go to help you make these decisions. And the best mentors I found are not the ones who tell me the answers. They're the ones who listen really well, and then they ask me clarifying and follow-up questions, and they help me get to the answer so that I have then ownership over the answer as opposed to them. Because if I own it, it's probably going to be better than if they own it and they told me what to do. So I try to do the same when I'm a mentor or a friend for others, where I'm not going to tell them what to do. I may ask them a lot of follow-up clarifying questions, and then as they talk it through, they come to the conclusion, or they make the decision, and they have full ownership over that decision as opposed to somebody else. So yeah, it's a combination of being in line with my purpose, my values, and then the people in my life who I'm lucky to have that will listen to me, be really thoughtful, and then ask me good follow-up questions that maybe open my mind to something I hadn't thought of before. And then after that, I'll probably make the call, and I'll be wrong some of the time, but that's okay. I think if you're not wrong every once in a while, you're probably not making decisions fast enough. And so you're never going to have 100% of the information, or you're never going to know fully before you say yes or no. So every time you make a decision, it's probably important to think about, like, after the fact, okay, this went well or it didn't go well. What happened leading up to me making that decision, so that I can learn from it, whether it went well or it didn't. It's just like the military; they always do after-action reviews, whether they're pilots or they're going on missions. Right? You're in the Israeli military, so you guys probably did this type of stuff. You do your after-action reviews after big decisions, and that will help you make better decisions in the future. So it's a problem if you just go through life making decisions and then never thinking about why it went well or why it didn't. Because like that comes from my background in sports. Like we watch film of every single practice, every single game, every single rep. I got a grade, and we talk through why did you do that? What made you make that throw? Why didn't you look off the safety? Like all this stuff that we go through, so that we learn from both the good decisions and the bad. And doing that, I think, gives you a better chance to continually make better and better decisions as you get a little bit older.
I love that reflection is a key pillar in your practice as a person and as a professional. I was talking about this recently, where I feel like one of the best hacks to cultivate and develop discipline is through reflection. You could see what does and doesn't work. And then, just to delve a bit further, I also love how you talk about your core values as the litmus test for how you make decisions. How did you figure out your core values? Maybe someone's struggling out there right now and doesn't know what they stand for.
Yeah.
Maybe hearing from you could help.
To me, this is where my friend Brooke Cups came into my life in 2017. I noticed he lived by his values of being tough, passionate, unified, and thankful. And I was like, whoa, like they just rolled off the tongue, and he explained what tough, passionate, unified, and thankful meant for him and how he got to his values. And so it was really aspirational. I'm like, I want to get there. And so we sat down and worked. I mean, my first initial set of core values, there was like 20. I hung them up in my house, like 20 core values. You might as well have none, because that's too many. You can't remember that, all that stuff. So he helped me really whittle them down to being thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And how do I live those out each day? It was really big. So probably getting some help from people, as well as just being reflective and saying like, what is important to me. I also think it helps to look at people in your life who you really admire. In my case, I thought of my mom and my dad and my brothers, of like some of the values that they embody that I really are aspirational for me, that are people that I love and admire the way in which they go about their days, as well as other people that do that. I think that's helpful to think of what you value most. And then it's just whittling them down to 3 or 4 so that they're memorable and that you could ask yourself those questions. Am I living out my values each day? But honestly, like the Score That Matters, like our book, the foundation of the book were those sessions that Brooke and I did together, where he would talk me through being tough, passionate, unified, and thankful, and that he helped me get to my place of being thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And the cool thing is, since we did it together, we just started going out and helping companies, helping leaders within companies, leadership teams, helping them clarify their purpose and their values, and to see like their eyes open and to feel like, oh my gosh, I feel a great sense of where I'm headed. Like my direction is so much more clear. That was part of the reasoning behind us writing together. Because before that, I'd written books, but never with anybody else. But I was like, wow, this could be this unique perspective of a teacher and a student within the same book. Usually a book is the teacher, right? They just say, this is the stuff, do this, here it is. Whereas you hear both of our perspectives, because I love that position of being the student with Brooke being the teacher. And to write a book together with somebody like that it's a really rich and rewarding experience. And now, it's finally out. Now we get a chance for other people to hopefully benefit. But yeah, the value stuff was foundational for all of it. And that started for me with him, 6-7 years ago now. When you were in the military, what type of stuff, because I don't know what that's like with serving in other countries' military. I don't know what it's like in our country, just from stories I've been told. What's it like? What were those years like?
In terms of...
Like, what'd you do? Where'd you go? What'd you do?
So I was stationed in Egypt for a few months. I served 2 years, right? And so about 8 months of it was training. And for the remainder, I was stationed doing patrols, arrests, and we'll call it, reinforcement of the Egyptian border. There were moments at the time where it's like circa 2008 where I graduated high school 3 days later. I enlisted all the way through 2010, and no one's really ever asked me this on the podcast.
I mean, I'm fascinated by the military. I give you guys huge, just bigger credit than it pretty much anything to do to serve.
So it's a lot of like Hummer patrols, a lot of, arrests, people, sometimes, just trying to get into the country illegally, and then they'd be arrested, and, they go to jail, and then they're released into the country eventually, which is a whole other thing. But it was one of those experiences where I had Hebrew as kind of a foundation. Like, I understood the principles grammatically, but when you learn over there, like, there's no better teacher than complete and full immersion. So for the first 2 months, I'm in like this basic training camp where they're teaching you what it's like to fire a weapon, like what the words are and commands are like when you're firing a weapon. M16. Eventually, I took on this weapon called a Negev, which is a 17-pound machine gun, about 60 pounds of gear, all in. And it, because my aim was so terrible, it was pretty much a machine gun that, would spray cover fire. And, you learn a lot about yourself in those moments, because you start to realize what you can do on no sleep. You start to realize what you could do with no food. You start to realize what you could do with, very, very little, and how capable you still are. And there's this great saying, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before: when you're 20 years old, your commander tells you to attack, you ask where. When you're 30, you ask how. And when you're 40, you ask why. And as that, as the different seasons of my life have progressed, I slowly see myself, embracing more of that mentality, like how and why, as opposed to just doing what I'm supposed to do because someone said I'm supposed to do it. Speaking of your future self, there's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'm not going to pose to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, assuming he's where you want to be, what do you think he would say to you?
Jeez, dude. It's so hard to know. I mean, part of one of my core values is being consistent, right? Thoughtful, thankful, curious, and consistent. And I think I would hope he'd say, live in alignment with those values, and that by doing so, it will put you in a position to do what you want. I mean, ultimately, like, what am I optimizing for? I'm optimizing to be free and to spend the majority of my days doing what I want, with who I want, when I want, how I want to do it. That's what I'm optimizing for. So I would hope that person would say, like, you've done a pretty good job at optimizing, of knowing what you want, and then creating a business around that then obviously benefits people enough so where you can support and provide for your family, because that's number one in my life. So that would be my hope, is, hey, if you live in alignment with those values, it's going to optimize for what you want, and good things will happen as a result for other people that you're serving. Because my business is fully dependent upon other people finding this stuff useful, and me being a value add. And if that ever stops, then my business goes away. So that's what I'm thinking about pretty much all the time. So it's a tough question, though. I got to think more about that too. I appreciate you posing a few that are going to make me think later on into the night as I maybe write a little bit.
I've had an awesome time here today. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Thanks, man. Learningleader.com. That's my home base for everything. All my books are at learningleader.com. The most recent book's called The Score That Matters. I'm very proud of it. I got to play the role of being a student within a book, which is kind of cool, and felt like you get to go inside what those coaching sessions are like, and hopefully it's implementable for other people. So, yeah, podcast is called The Learning Leader Show. It's on all platforms, and learningleader.com is everywhere, man.
Ryan, thank you so much for the time today, man.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate you having me.